It was September 26, 1983, 3 weeks after the Soviet Union shot down Korean Airlines Flight 007. The Cold War wasn't just cold. It was frozen solid, cracking at the edges. Both superpowers had their fingers on buttons, convinced the other was about to strike first. And in a secret bunker just outside Moscow, a 44-year-old lieutenant colonel sat in a dimly lit room, staring at a giant screen. His name was Stanislav Petrov. His job? Watch for American nuclear missiles. The system was brand new. Satellites, computers, artificial intelligence before we even called it that. At exactly 15 minutes past midnight, the screen turned red. A word flashed in Russian: launch. Then another: launch, 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 launch. The computer was screaming that 5 Minuteman ICBMs were arcing over the North Pole. The protocol was clear: confirm, call the Kremlin, and within minutes the Soviet Union would launch a full counterstrike. What the computer didn't know, and what Petrov had maybe half a second to decide, was that this was a ghost, a satellite glitch, and in that 0.5 second space between protocol and instinct, a man who was never meant to be a hero chose to do nothing. To understand what happened in that half second, you need to understand the room. The bunker was called Serpukhov 15. It was built to be the Soviet Union's early warning nerve center. Rows of terminals, radar feeds, a giant wall screen that displayed the northern hemisphere in green and black. Petrov was not a high-ranking general. He was an engineer, a thinker, someone who understood that the new Oko satellite system, which used telescopes pointed at the Earth's horizon to detect missile exhaust, was fragile. It had been rushed into service. He had written the training manuals for it himself. On the night shift, the usual commander had fallen ill. Petrov was filling in. A cosmic accident. The room was quiet, coffee steam, flickering monitors, and then the buzzer. It wasn't a subtle alarm. It was a 120 decibel siren designed to override all human hesitation. The wall screen erupted with the word launch in blood red. A single Minuteman missile, the computer said, had left silos in the United States. Within seconds, it was 5 missiles. The protocol was simple. Petrov had to pick up the phone and report to the general staff. From there, the order would go to the Soviet leader, Yuri Andropov. Andropov was paranoid, ill, and surrounded by hardliners who believed a U.S. first strike was imminent. The retaliation would be automatic. What the computer didn't explain, what no AI could process, was that the satellite's angle to the sun that night was unusual. The very edge of the Earth's limb, where the sensors peered, was catching a rare alignment of high-altitude clouds, glints of sunlight, reflections that looked to a silicon brain exactly like rocket plumes. Petrov's eyes didn't just see the screen. He saw its potential to lie. And that's where the 0.5 seconds begins. I want you to imagine that moment, not as a movie, as a real body in a real chair. Your heart slams, your vision tunnels, the siren is so loud it physically hurts. The phone is right there, your hand, almost involuntarily, twitches toward it. In that 0.5 seconds, a cascade of thoughts, if you can even call them thoughts, collides in Petrov's brain. First, the training. Relay the information immediately. You are not paid to think. Second, the logic. The Americans he had studied would not launch a first strike with only 5 missiles. A first strike would be massive, hundreds, thousands, to cripple the Soviet response. 5 was weird. It made no strategic sense. Third, the doubt. The new satellite system had already generated false positives. He knew the algorithms were imperfect. He had complained about them. Nobody listened. Fourth, the ground radar. The bunker had an independent radar that tracked objects in the atmosphere. It was silent, nothing. But ground radar wouldn't see missiles for another few minutes. They were still in their boost phase, too high for that old tech. So its silence proved nothing, yet. And fifth, and this is the one that matters, the gut. The thing in the stomach that has no language. Petrov later said, "I had a funny feeling in my gut." That gut feeling was not mystical. It was the sum of 1,000 tiny pattern recognitions that his conscious mind couldn't articulate. The angle of the sun, the time of year, the absurdity of a 5-missile attack. the fact that the system was too sure of itself. In less time than it takes to blink, he chose to trust that funny feeling. His hand did not pick up the phone. Instead, he picked up the internal line and reported, "False alarm. System malfunction." The room went silent. The siren still blared. The screen still glowed. His colleagues stared at him like he had just signed his own execution warrant. Because if he was wrong, in 20 minutes, Washington, D.C., New York, and 100 other American cities would be erased, and Soviet cities would follow within the hour. He waited. 1 minute, 2, 3. The ground radar stayed empty. The satellite screen flickered. The missiles were ghosts. The 0.5-second decision had been correct. The aftermath of Petrov's decision was complicated. He wasn't celebrated. The Soviet military was embarrassed. Their billion-dollar system failed. They hushed it up. Petrov was reprimanded for improper paperwork. He was never given a medal. He retired quietly, suffered a breakdown, and lived in obscurity in a small town, tending his garden. For decades, the world didn't know his name. Then in 1998, a former officer published a memoir. The story leaked. Slowly, the West realized a man we never trained, never prepared, never asked, had saved us all. In 2006, he was honored at the United Nations. They called him the man who averted nuclear war. He received a small statue and a handshake. He later said, "I was just at the right place at the right time and the right half second." So what really happened in that 0.5 seconds? Neuroscience has an answer. Your gut feelings are not magic. They're the brain's ultra-fast pattern-matching system. The basal ganglia, a part of the brain that controls habit and implicit learning, constantly compares incoming data against a vast library of past experiences without ever consulting the conscious mind. It's a direct line from perception to action. Petrov's brain had logged thousands of hours of satellite data anomalies, military protocols, and the logic of attack patterns. It assembled, in a flash, a probability matrix that told him, "This is wrong." He felt it before he knew it. That's a speedy strike, not a kick, but a neural lightning bolt. A signal that traveled faster than the conscious mind and changed the course of 4 billion lives. Stanislav Petrov died in 2017, quietly, unfamously, but his half-second of instinct remains the most important reflex in human history. If you ever doubt that one person, in one instant, can alter everything, remember the bunker, remember the red screen, remember the man who didn't pick up the phone. If this story gave you chills, you're exactly who we make these for. Subscribe, hit the bell, and walk with us into the next flash of history. Until next time, stay curious, stay fast.